Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Nothing for Nothing Leaves Nothing podcast. I am your host, Lewis, and today's topic is going to be truth. Let's talk about it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. I know it's been a while since we had an episode come out, but in today's episode, we're going to talk about truth. So, truth. What kind of truths are we talking about? We're going to talk about personal truths. Truths in life. Just how things are viewed from an individual's perspective, namely your own. And taking a look at how people process and deal with their truth. So when dealing with truth, most people usually look at things about their past, things that have happened in their life, and how those things affect them, and then how those things move forward to pretty much develop the story of their life. So in using myself for an example, obviously the first question you ask is, what is truth? So according to the Oxford Language Dictionary, or from definitions, it says truth is a noun, the quality or state of being true. The example they give is he had to accept the truth of her acquisition. That's a weird thing to put. And then they have another one that says that which is true or in accordance with the fact or reality. A fact or belief that is accepted as true. Plural noun, truths. Let's talk about it. So in this podcast, there's been a lot of stuff going on in my life recently. And some things positive, some things negative. But I would say probably the honest newest thing as far as when it comes from a truth standpoint is obviously getting back into the spiritual aspect of life. Getting back to a walk with God and understanding what your place is, what your role is from a spiritual aspect. Now the thing with when things come from a spiritual aspect, like for us, for most people, like your first touch of anything spiritual comes from when you're younger, right? If you go to church and your family was heavily involved in the church, a lot of times for the black community, that's always a big thing. You grow up in the church, and that shows in many different aspects depending on what your denomination is, Baptist, Catholic, and, things of that nature. So a lot of time that consisted of, you was at church on Sundays. Saturdays were rehearsals, whether it was, choir rehearsal for the adults and then choir rehearsal for the kids. You had usher rehearsal, pretty much the whole gambit of, involvement in the church. For me, my involvement in the church came at a young age because my family was heavily into the church. And my grandmother in particular, my dad's mom in particular, she was on the pastor's age. She did it. She did it all. And subsequently, my aunties, followed in suit. My mom, same, right? So that's where you get your first taste of it. And then as you grow, and obviously you want to stay involved in the church as best you can, but as you grow, you tend to see yourself moving in the direction of almost like, I would say, like a rebellious spirit, to where you get to the point where you're like, man, I kind of want to do my own thing. I'm kind of tired of going to church. And then you go through and start living life. And when you live in life, you go through and experience different things. And through those experiences, you either lean on your core, right? Which it was obviously, like I said, through the church. So your core understanding of things, how things work in the world and what's going on. But as you get older, you tend to, the more you stay away from it, the more you tend to, you become distance. You have a distance there. And I'm mainly talking about myself. So everybody's experience is different. But that was pretty much my experience. And then as I continue to live, the things, as they say, of the world become, more appealing to you, more of a center focus for you. And that's something where you have to be like, okay, like what's, how am I going to navigate that? But you don't really realize it till later. So now as I listen to, you can always delve yourself in the Word of God, in many different aspects. Obviously, the one key aspect is to, have an understanding and reading of the Bible, right? But you don't read the Bible like a normal book. You read it to learn. You study the Bible. Is pretty much what I'm saying. And from there, as you look at, different men of God that are, given a word and understanding that, when they're preaching from scripture, that certain things might, tug on your spirit and certain things might not. And you just have to have an understanding for how that stuff affects and relates to you. And when I say that, I mean, like, you can have people listening, you can have multiple people listening to the same word, and people can be, and everybody's pulling something different from the aspect of the word they're listening to. So when you look at it from that standpoint, each person's spiritual walk is their own spiritual walk. Now, when you're walking and you're getting yourself right with God, God tends to use you in different ways. He has many aspects of how he can use you. And sometimes you're being used and not even know you're being used, right? That's kind of the one glory of the Lord, is him having that aspect and doing those particular things to use you and know you not know that you're being used when you don't have that understanding. But as you learn and grow, you increase your walk, you increase your spiritual being and your involvement of having God just pretty much intertwined in different parts of your life. You understand and learn things, and those things take effect. So when I talk about a truth, it's more so you digging into more of an understanding of yourself. So like for me, the things I've been going through recently, and how that things affect me from a spiritual standpoint, and also from just a way you live in life. Like the way I relate it to is, and shout out to my Aunt Barbara, because she said this when we were talking on the phone one time when we was out having a conversation, and I was saying some stuff to her, and she was like, okay, I look at this person, she pretty much summing it up, kind of summing it up in the aspect, and she was like, look at this person, now you're being all holy and spiritual, and you want to talk about things a certain way or whatever and stuff like that, which, most people take offense to that, like, oh man, she's trying to call me out for stuff. But to me, I was like, the fact that somebody noticed the change in me, and, kind of how I'm trying to live my life a little bit differently, trying to do things a little bit differently, was cool, right? I didn't take offense to it. It was pretty nice. But when you look at that and you start reflecting on things in your life, just in general, everybody in life is going through different things. And as you get older, you start to realize and look at stuff. And a lot of times you might question things that you did and how you did it. And you just looking at examining pretty much what was going on. What was your mindset at? What were you thinking? What was your thought process? And then from a spiritual standpoint, you look at those things and you tie in the spiritual realm to it, right? Like you're looking at it and you're like, okay, where, how was God involved in this thing? How was, my spiritual walk tied to certain things and certain aspects of your life? And there were times where you look back on stuff and realize that you didn't have any ties to it. But as they say, God is always there. Everybody at some point has been through a situation where, even if you're a non-believer, because, you have atheists and stuff out there and people that just believe different things. And I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty spot on from, many people I talk to, friends of mine, associates or whatever, that they've had points in their life where something happened and it was unexplained, right? And when I mean something happened, like something bad or negative happened, something major negative happened, and they was able to pull through what came out of it, right? And they're like, yeah, man, I was super lucky. For the spiritual folks, you're like, that's not luck, that's God. That's you being covered by the Holy Spirit, being covered by the blood of Jesus. And, that's how you got through. So looking at that, and when I looked at putting together a podcast on truth, I was looking at, okay, what are my truths? I'm a father. I am a son, right? Still a person that's trying to figure out my place in the world in the grand scheme of things, right? But obviously that big one is being a father. That holds a lot of weight. That holds a lot of substance for me because I have a daughter. And with a lot of things going on recently and how kind of life is going, people might have their views and perspective on it, but regardless of how people look at it or view your first goal in everything when you're a parent is to make sure that your child is good. In whatever way, shape, or form. You might not always do it the best, or might not always know how to do it correctly, but if you have a good mind about you, or heart, I would say, because you got some people that just don't have no heart about it. Your focus is always to make sure your child is taken care of and make sure your child is good. And whatever way, shape, or form that is, right? Obviously, you have financial stuff, you have emotional concepts and aspects. So you have to look at that and make that be your driving focus. But for me, like, there were a lot of things that I started realizing in my life that weren't good for me. And as I started to make that realization, I started to make changes. And a lot of those changes come from just understanding that certain things that you have around you, certain just things going on in your sphere, sometimes you got to cut stuff off, right? Like, you have to, if I'll use an example, I heard it in the sermon before too, where it's like, and I believe it's in the Bible, I would have to double check. I am not a full Bible thumper, so I'm still working and trying to grow in that aspect. But in the sense of when you have things in your life that's going on and things become like pretty much a cancer or something that becomes an issue, you have to learn how to cut things out. And when I say things, that can go from just situations, that can go from people, you can go from environments that you're in. I mean, you can go all across the scope of the gambit to understand. You might, as you tend to get older and you tend to move a certain way and you tend to look to try to strive for something, a lot of times the things that you had around you, you have to let go. And then those things, you end up letting them go, but then you have things that grow from that as well. So being mindful of that and just understanding yourself, understanding what is your truth, right? What is you? Can you be honest, genuine, and wholesome about the stuff that you have going on and who you are as a person? And I think a lot of people, is something that people struggle with. I know I struggle with it. And me, I use this podcast for an example. Like, I was steady at, pumping out episodes. And then I did my last episode, which was on suicide, which was a really tough episode for me, but it was a good episode because it was therapeutic, to talk about, just talk about some things when it comes to dealing with suicide. And it's probably a topic I'm probably going to revisit again at some point. But when I'm looking at truth, is like, how can I improve on myself and become a better person? I've talked to some friends recently about different things, and I'm probably going to have probably one of my next episodes, I'll dive into that. So I don't have a topic for it yet. But one of those things that we talked about was to talk about having motivation. And I'm focusing on, like I said, with me, still being a father and making sure my daughter's good, I still have to focus on myself because I still have to provide and be the best version of myself for her, no matter what's going on. So even if you have those days when you kind of keep them to yourself, you kind of trying to decompress with the things going on around you, that don't mean that you get to slack off and, not still keep yourself motivated, keep yourself going and progressing in life the way you need to. For me, my whole journey now, especially when it comes to my own truth, is one, make sure I'm good and right with God in every aspect as I can be. I'm not perfect. I will never be perfect. And that's something that you can always strive for perfection and strive to be the best version of yourself. And if you're doing that, kudos to you. Keep rocking and rolling. For me, I felt like for a lot of time, in a good amount of time, like, I kind of just forgot about myself. And when I started realizing that, I'm like, dang, like, you get into this tailspin of like, what happened to me? Not to the point where you're getting into a state of depression or anything like that, but you're just looking and realizing like, what happened to me? And trying to find that understanding in what happened and what your goal is and where you're going moving forward. I'm 37 years old, and half the time I feel like my body is like 50. Makes no sense when you think about it, right? Like, 37 years old, dude, you should be good, moving and stuff like that. But there are aspects of it. There are a lot of times where I would lean on like, man, I was in the military for 10 years, did a lot of stuff, had some injuries from that and things of that nature. That's why I feel the way I feel. But when you look at the truth of it, the reason I feel the way I feel and why I am the way I am is because simply I got lazy, right? You tend to stop doing the things that you were doing before for whatever reason you're doing. And understanding that You can never place blame on somebody else for what you're dealing with and what your situation is. And the reason I say that is because that's where accountability comes in. It's quick and easy to be like, man, I'm dealing with this because I'm dealing with this person. I'm dealing with this because of this situation. I'm dealing with this because of this. At the end of the day, you have to look inside yourself and understand and have your own self accountability. And when doing that, a lot of times you might end up pissing some people off. Like, you might have people around you that might be like, man, you're not accountable for the things that you've done or whatever, and such and such and such and such. But you have to understand that you having self accountability for the stuff that you did and what you've done. At some point, if you haven't expressed it to a person, express it. If it's a situation where you have expressed things and, you know, the people around you, like from your circle, just don't see it, it's not much you can do. At the end of the day, you have to continue to focus and grow yourself. Show them the best version of you, and one of two things are going to happen. Either people are going to get on board and rock and roll with the new person that you, I'm not going to say new person, the better person that you've become and that you are, or they're going to distance themselves because what you're doing and how you're moving is not meshing with whatever they have from a core perspective. And if that happens, that's okay. It's okay to not have the same people around, because as you grow, people either grow with you or you grow apart from them. And I think that's the realization that in the world now that a lot of people don't get, and a lot of people tend to hold on and kind of try to drag people along with them, when at some point you have to understand and realize, like, look, man, I can't pull you to where I am or where I'm going if you're not going to do your own stuff. And a lot of times that come up in situations like, whether it's friendships, dealing with family, I mean, from a professional standpoint, things of that nature, like if you have people around you, like if you have a little core group or whatever, friends and stuff like that, and you see one person in a group making moves and doing things to set themselves up for a better life or just to strive to do better, and then you have ones that are kind of in the group but they're not doing it, but then they're looking at the person that's making moves and progressing and getting better, they look at that with an issue. And you have no control about how people are going to respond or how people are going to feel. All you can do is worry about yourself and focus on yourself. If you treat people right, you deal with people respectfully, and you give people the proper common courtesies on the things that are going on and how you're interacting with them, usually the outcome is going to be positive. And positivity is a nice way to live, not being stressed out, not letting things stress you out too much. Like, you're going to have stresses in life because that's just the way life goes. You see a person that's going through life and they say they have no stresses, I find that hard to believe, because there's always a thing that can come up, something that can happen, and something that can throw things off to where you're like, okay, I need to recalibrate, I need to rebalance. For me, my rebalance now, like I said, is leaning on the spiritual aspect. And people that I talk to, my guy group from the church, from when I went through a program at the church, we still all talk, we still connect, and a lot of times we'll touch base. And sometimes when we touching base, it's just, just touching in with each other, like, hey man, what's going on, how things been, and then small conversations there and there, just to kind of get the feel and see where everybody's at and how everything's going. So having people to kind of recalibrate yourself with and to, bounce stuff off of, is like, hey, especially for guys, it's a very difficult thing. And how that goes and how that plays in, it for us, it's always like a masculinity thing of, I'm a guy, I'm tough, I can deal with anything, I'm good. But at some point you have to sit there and realize, like, look, man, I'm just a normal person. I have stress, I have things in life that come up and things that, might trip you up on certain things if you're pushing for a goal or trying to accomplish something. It happens. Like I said, for me, my biggest thing now is taking care of myself, from grooming standpoint, from a health standpoint, and just, an overall standpoint of trying to make sure I can be around for my daughter, be around to live life, be around to enjoy the things that you work hard for. Currently, I am currently employed and working, like I said, do this podcast there on the side, and it's not for monetary gain, nothing like that. It's just something just kind of help me deal with my process and how things are working. But also going to school for what, right? Why am I going back to school? I'm going to school to better myself. I'm finishing a degree in something that I believe will, for me, be able to take care of me and be able to take care of my daughter long term. And that's always the goal. You want to push and motivate and strive for something better. From a health standpoint, losing weight, getting myself back into a shape and a status of better health. Not saying I'm gonna be walking around here, you do walk around chiseled, muscles popping all over the place, but get into a state where you're healthy, a state where you're not worrying about cholesterol, you're not worrying about diabetes becoming an issue, you're not worrying about cardiovascular issues. These are the things for me that has become the center focus of my life and how I'm tending to do things. And also, like I said, just having positive interactions with folks as best I can. It's not always the easiest thing. And it's always something that can come up and people can be like, oh, well, you say you want to be positive, but your interaction with this particular person is this way. Your interaction with this person is this way. And that's fine. Things are not always going to be peachy keen jelly bean all the time. So just having that understanding and knowing that the small steps you take progress you to where you want to get to for long term and for a full aspect of your life. Changing your dynamic and changing how you view things is never a bad thing. So when you're dealing with your truths, understand that when dealing with truths, you're going to come across some stuff that you're not proud of, that you're not happy with, and you have to work on those things. I have, from a spiritual standpoint, prayed about a lot of stuff that I was dealing with and things that I've done or have dealt with at different points in time that have been something that I noticed was long term. It was going on for years and years and years and years, and it was something that becomes a struggle. So anytime you deal with struggles, for believers, you turn around and you turn it to God. And the thing is, when you turn things to God, you have to realize and focus on the fact that when you turn it over to Him, you turn it to Him and let Him work on it. You still pray about it. You still are cognizant of things. You're still cognizant of your struggles. And as you continue to grow and progress in your life, you understand those and know that those particular things can be pitfalls for you. Those particular things can be setbacks for you. Setbacks are okay. Like I said, you're not perfect, so it's going to happen. Even if you're not doing things from a spiritual standpoint, which obviously I will encourage everybody to do. But even if you're not doing things from a spiritual standpoint, if you're doing things and looking at yourself and understanding yourself, who you are, what you do, how you move, and just look at and examine different aspects of how you're living. I'm not going to sit here and say everybody lives the right way or you're always going to live the right way, like I said, but you have to be aware. And all you can do is be aware of your situations and aware of the things going on around you, and aware of the interactions that you're having with folks. If most of the interactions you have with folks are good, you usually get good feedback back. There are those few outliers where you can try to be as best on your best with people, and then it still comes back negatively. That's just the interaction that you have, and you just have to understand that. I was in a training today when I was at work, and it was talking about doing, just kind of having some conversations with folks. And one of the things that came up is a lot of times when you're dealing with people, you have to be able to, it was like an 80-20 rule, but listen 80% of the time, speak 20% of the time. And it's like, wow, you listen to that and people are like, what do you mean? Like, how's this supposed to work in just normal day life? It works. Well, if you're having an interaction with somebody and having a conversation, depending on how that conversation is going, give the person that you're having a conversation with that chance and opportunity to speak and to get all their thoughts out. And then you speak and have a, you speak and respond to it. Unless they're, mid thought, they stop and say, hey, well, what do you think? Or what are your thoughts? And it's one of those things where it just breeds a positive interaction with people around you. It breeds a positive interaction with the people that you're talking to. It breeds a positive interaction just in general. And things continue to grow. And that's always what you want. So, like I said, when talking about my truths, like I said, I am by no means the perfect person. I wasn't a perfect husband. No, I haven't been a perfect father at times. And no, I haven't been a perfect son, nephew, brother. You can run down the whole gamut. But all I can do now is understand and realize those situations, realize those things, and use those things to be able to become and change my life to a way where my interactions with folks tend to end up good, on the good outcome. And my focus is geared toward being like I said, the best version of myself that I can be. And like I said, you're going to have stumbles and things of that nature. So I say to end this podcast, when it comes to truth, be true to yourself, understand yourself, and have the self awareness to be able to identify your pitfalls, your issues. If somebody's calling out an issue of yours, don't be quick to judge and say, no, that's not my issue. Examine yourself and see if that is something that is an issue for you. If it is, you work on it. You work to improve. That's all you can do. We're not perfect people. Nobody in the world is perfect. And as we go through this crazy journey called life, you will see that things can change on a whim and things can get a little chaotic at any point in time. But stay true to yourself. Lean on your truth. Understand who you are, what you do, and how you're trying to live the best life you can. You're trying to be the best version of yourself you can. And at the end of the day, man, God will be there to guide you. Whether you're a believer or not a believer, whether you're somebody that believes in the spiritual or doesn't believe, I just believe that He is always around and always guiding you through. That's how I feel like I got through most of the stuff that I've been dealing with lately and continue to deal with. And I pray everybody stays safe out there, stays positive, and continues to grow in whichever way, shape, and aspect or form that you are trying to grow. I will catch you guys on the next podcast. Y'all stay good, and I'll see you on the next one.